Hello everybody, hope you're doing well and welcome back to another video. In today's video I'm so excited because I'm going to be doing my June wrap up, and the month of June was, I think, my best month I've ever had of reading. And yeah, let's get into it. Quite a big stack, 15 physical, which came out to 3,748 pages, which is my second highest of the year, only a little bit behind January. And I had one audiobook that was 12.9 hours. In the month of June, I decided that I only wanted to read books about or by queer authors and like queer stories, because obviously June is Pride Month. So for my review, I made myself a homemade vanilla iced latte, not sponsored by Starbucks. I made it myself, because iced lattes are the drink of the queers. And yeah, let's get started. So the first book I read was Richard Scott's poetry collection called Soho. I ended up giving this 4.75 stars. I really enjoyed this. It's quite short. I did like underlining and stuff, and a lot of them I starred as well. In it, Scott gives us 47 poems, which starts with him in a library when he's like younger, and he decides to write cock in the margin of a poem because there is no poems that he like can relate to or about like being queer. And it ends in the epic, which is Oh My Soho, which acts as sort of like a love letter to Soho and like the queer community of the past and moving on to the future as well. And then the middle sections include poems on admission, which sort of like love poems, and then shame. And I really enjoyed like most of them. A few that was like a few where the main topic was about like sexual experiences weren't necessarily to my taste that much, but the ones about this sort of like idea of shame and like just a lot of them I really understood and I did really enjoy. And like I said, I did star a lot of this book, and there are so many great quotes. So if you want to check out my full review where I have quotes from the book, that's on my Goodreads and StoryGraph, that is in the description below. So yeah. Then I read Nevada by Imogen Binney, and given this 3.75 stars. This is about sort of like a young trans woman, Maria, and she is having like years of like professional and personal like pushbacks and just sort of like stale points. So she decides to like change it, and then afterwards we meet another character called James, and we get to like know him as well. I did kind of like this. I think it was good at like what it was trying to say and like the messages and how it's like to live in a trans body in like contemporary society. There was definitely like minimal plot, but I feel like you're more there for like the messages and the discussions on like sexuality and gender, and like identity and like the role of women. And yeah, these are definitely my favorite parts of the book. At the start, I did quite like the main character Maria's like monologuing, where she goes into these sort of like long-winded, convoluted passages, where it's sort of like very tangented and like goes off on one a little bit, but as it went on I did find them quite unrealistic and a little bit like, I don't know, like it could have been edited, and I was sort of like losing attention a little bit. And then another thing that I didn't really like that much was the excessive like description of like drug taking and drug use, which I just wasn't really that keen on, and it definitely becomes more of a theme when we get to James's parts. Yeah, but what I think I hated the most is that the main character uses like all the time, and it is so jarring. I thought at the start it was okay because it's like I'm doing it myself now. It's like she's just talking to you like as it's like a very like informal, like a discussion, like just like with your friend. But afterwards it just gets far too repetitive. I was in one quite small paragraph that it was used 9 times, and it's excessive, I think, from like. So I did decide to drop it down like about 4.5 stars for that reason alone. And yeah, I definitely do recommend this, and I think it was very good for what it did at the time, and like filling a space for trans literature, and lots of people can like relate to the characters even though it isn't meant to be or marketed as a generalized experience of two just different pre and post transition characters. I use pre and post because that's what Imogen uses in her like afterword at the end to describe the experiences. So yeah, so I do recommend this. I just also do have some personal problems with it that I just wasn't too keen on it, especially with like the writing. But yeah. And thirdly, I read Mooncakes by Wendy Xu and Suzanne Walker. This is like a YA graphic novel. The artwork is absolutely beautiful. It's such great colours. And yeah, so I would really recommend it just for that alone. But oh my, the story was so good. I'm giving this 5 stars. This follows the like 2 main protagonists sort of. First is Nova, and she is a young witch, and she lives with her grandmothers Chuli and Nechima, who I strongly believe are a lesbian couple. And then she's like in the woods, and then she sees Tam, who is a werewolf, and her like old like childhood crush in a way. And what ensues is sort of like a fantasy magical sort of like plot line where they have to sort of like make sure the power of wolf magic doesn't get in the hands of the wrong people. But also there is this lovely like romance rekindling between the two of them, which is just so adorable. But that's all I'm gonna say about the plot. And what I love so much is that Tam is like non-binary and uses they them pronouns, and like once are they misgendered by Chuli, and then Tam is like, I use they them pronouns, and then Chuli doesn't get mistaken one more single time. And also like the baddie of the book uses the correct pronouns as well, and I just felt it just makes it so like it just shows that it's just something so easy to just do. And even if like you think you need to double think when you're thinking and saying stuff, as just take that little extra second or two just to make sure you're saying it right, which I just love so much. And Nova is hard of hearing and she uses hearing aids as well. And there is sort of like some discourse on how it has like affected her, but she is thriving, and it's just so great to see like this representation. There's also like another character that is like drawn a bit bigger than the other ones, and there's just, I don't know, just so much representation. I just absolutely adore this book. I'm so happy that it's a thing for like younger people to have, and I would so recommend this. Absolutely loved it. 4th book I read, but I didn't, it was an audiobook, was The Hidden Case of Ewan Forbes, the transgender trial that threatened to upend the British establishment, by Zoe Playden. And I'm giving this 4 stars. I was going to give it a full 5-star rating, but I've read some other reviews and some online discourse, which is summarized in this article I put in my review. So I did decide to lower it down to a 4, just because there is possibly some fallacies in one of the cases, or the main one, but I do still feel confident recommending it. I think because I can't fully remember, and I do kind of want to talk about this one, I'm just going to read my review on that I posted. So I said Playden does a great job at portraying Ewan's life in a very fascinating, and he and his wife Patty seem like such lovely people, and they're a real rock in their community. His story is the focus, but there's also other trans individuals, and the book showcases the history of trans rights, or lack thereof, with a focus on the UK. Other cases, specifically that of April Ashley, P and R, they're like names that was given to them to protect their identity, were all fascinating and landmarks in their own right. Playden takes us from the early 1900s up through to 2020, and negating the possible fallacies in the primary story, the history and cases were true. This is by far my favourite part of the book and the reason I loved it so much. I definitely learned loads from it, and for this reason I still feel comfortable in recommending it. To trans people, the rest of us that make up the LGBTQ plus community, we've long forgotten our trans and non-binary siblings, allies, and everybody else. There is certainly a focus on the law, different cases, acts and bills, and the like, but it was well written. And I said I did listen to the audiobook and I did enjoy this. I found it maybe not directly seeing the information did help a bit because it just kept my interest. And most importantly, this story should be told, and either purposely or not, was forgotten about for many years. As mentioned above, the case of Ewan Forbes and later of April Ashley did heavily impact the lives of trans people then and currently still do. Whilst the former did win, Patty later stated, "Those that win do so at a personal cost," referencing the vile treatment of Ewan and subsequently many others in his sex identification examination and the pressing personal questions the couple were forced to answer to. Ashley was so horrendously treated by her husband, and this was truly horrible to read at times, but sadly her experience wasn't a one-off. For many years that followed, trans people's rights were taken and their standing in society heavily jeopardised. When Forbes was younger, he self-identified as male. He sought out affirmable medical treatment, changed his birth certificate, until 1965 lived a nearly equal life to cisgender people. Despite coming from a very rich background and a mother, Gwendolyn, who helped out massively. Side note, so she basically fully accepted him and helped find/fund the necessary treatment, and this was over 100 years ago, when times were by and large very, very different to today, but still parents choose not to accept or even recognise trans people now. ... I thought we moved forward, but okay. Trans people could take these steps to feel more comfortable in their bodies and society. After Forbes' case was hidden and Ashley's lost, these steps were made unavailable, as someone's gender would be solely defined by their birth certificate, leading to the disgusting treatment of trans people in all aspects of life for over a decade and still now. Conversion therapy and forced sterilisation was taking place in the 1970s up until 1996. That's 3 years before I was born. Like, I cannot understand that. It's, oh my god. And yeah, how is this possible? Honestly, it's sickening what many faced and is explained in this book. I'm so angry just writing this. A quote from the book sums up a lot of this period. Trans people were objects for discussion, deluded masqueraders at best to be told who and what they are, and in no way experts on their own lives. And does it sound familiar to things happening now? It does to me. Still, trans people aren't awarded the rights they deserved and once had, and the growing transphobic rhetoric in cultural wars and laws/bills being passed in many places around the world, US. What I also found interesting was the discourse on media portrayals of trans people and how they were expressed and impacted the attitudes of the time. These and many aspects of the book are focused on the UK, which again I love, as I feel much of queer history is told via a US-centric lens, so it was refreshing. But Playden does include things from America, Europe, Australia and other places too. Two related court cases, that of P and R, involved two trans women who stood their ground, were immensely brave and inspirational in the face of the UK and EU courts, and were integral to the trans rights movement, but there's still a lot more to do. And then finally, I just talk about how that something I didn't really like is that how it is sort of acts as like a biography for Forbes, but I don't know if it's necessarily right, because obviously he was he died by the time it was written, and Zoe played and spoke with like the family and stuff. So I would like to think that he would like his story to be told, but at the same time it's possibly a little bit of a grey area. But overall, I do think this book is good, and I would definitely recommend it still. And thirsty because this book I have a lot to say, a lot of good things as well. This is Fake Dates and Mooncakes by Shirley, and we're giving this 5 stars. I absolutely adored this book. It is so adorable. I just loved it. I absolutely loved it. So I don't usually pick up like romance books, queer or not, but I'm so happy I decided to pick this up. And I cannot say a single bad thing about it. I wholeheartedly enjoyed like everything about it, the characters, the story. Just I loved it. There's maybe some like insta love sort of, but I know some people don't like it, but I think what it does well like negates any of the possible like dislike of insta love, and I just loved it. I practically ate this up, and I did not want to put it down like at all. In terms of plot, so we're basically following Dylan's POV, and he is 17. He recently lost his mother, and he is living with his aunt Jade and her 2 children, Megan and Tim, and he like the restaurant is struggling, and oh yeah, they own a Chinese Singaporean restaurant in New York, and then he's out doing a delivery and he sees Theo, and like there's a little bit like the scenario is a bit awkward and stuff and things, and then afterwards Theo comes back and like things like sort of like happening in a way, sort of, I don't know, but Theo asked him to be his fake date to a wedding, and then they go to his wedding, and there is a lot of like rich people drama with Theo's family because Theo's like really rich, yeah, but also Dylan is trying to recreate his his grandmother's mooncake recipe for this special type of mooncake, so he can do it, make it at this like festival, so they can get recognition for his aunt's business because it's struggling. And yes, that's sort of like the plot. But oh my, I was here for the plot, but I was here for the characters because the characters were just so damn adorable and so lovely. I absolutely love them. Dylan is just so great. He's just such like, he's so hardworking, and he clearly loves his family. He's been brought up so well, and also he has such like a passion for like color, like food and like making stuff, but also like Asian and Chinese and Singaporean like heritage and like the language and customs and traditions. And he definitely it like explores this with Theo, who has lost touch of his Asian roots, and it's just so beautiful to see. And it's a romance, so it's not really a spoiler, but there is a romance between the 2 of them, and that is just the most heartwarming thing. It is so adorable. A lot of people say it's a little bit like Heartstopper, and I so agree. It's like it's that lovely like sweetness, and it's just adorable. But also like the other characters, Megan, Dylan's cousin, and also Theo's cousin, who I forgot her name now, but she was really great. And they're both like great allies as well, and yeah, I like, it's not a literary masterpiece, but it's YA, and I feel that you can like forget about that, because it is just so damn cute and so great. I absolutely adored this. So yeah, 100% recommend. If this book was read in a different month, this probably would have been the favorite, but I have 2 more coming up that very narrowly took its place as being the best of the month, but this is really up there as one of my favorites I've read, like, in total. So yeah, so recommend that. Then I read Permafrost by Eva Balthazar, translated from Catalan by Julia Sanchez. This is my first book by a Spanish author, but it's not translated from Spanish because I believe Balthazar is from like Catalonia. I think she's from Barcelona. But yeah, this is another book I like underlined and like sort of annotated in a way, but this book follows the like unknown protagonist, who I believe is in her like 30s, and she is described as a no bullshit lesbian narrator. That's from the back. And there is some like somewhat linear, but it's also very fluctuation-y and quite convoluted. But the main character, she just sprawls her like razor sharp like thoughts on modern life with us, and I just quickly reading off it because I kind of forgot some of this book, but she talks about her travels across Europe, short-lived love affairs with many women, her family, and the controlling nature of her mother in particular, childhood and growing up knowing she's gay, with thoughts that make her feel happy, but also still this part in the back of her mind that she'll grow into liking boys, not girls. I sort of went off here, and it's very in keeping with the book, with many tangents but are fun to explore and really ground the reader in our narrator's life, living as a person, I guess, with the multitudes of familiar and societal expectations and more. A major topic is her thoughts of suicide, battle with mental illness, and suicide attempts, which are insightful, making you think, but personally there was a little unnerving feeling where humour at such a tragic moment may seem a little crass. But then again, it is something people in some situations do turn to, so I do get it. But yeah, like the translator Julia Sanchez's afterwards, where she perfectly sums up a thought I had. Eva Balthazar takes up issues that are often treated with kid gloves, a child's understanding of sex, death by suicide, illness, and addresses them with the same transparency due to anything else. And I do think it's this that I like the most. And yeah, so I said, Balthazar is a poet, so it is quite somewhat lyrical, the wording and things, but I did get it as well, and I do think it was written well. I didn't leave in this 4 stars. There was a lot I liked, but also something I didn't like, but I would really recommend this. And this is the first in a triptych about, it's going to be about 3 different women. I do have the second one as well, but I haven't read it yet, and the third one hasn't been translated into English yet, so I obviously need to wait for that. But yeah, I would still recommend this book, but it wasn't my favourite. Now we get on to a book that I have a weird relationship with this book. This is The Madonna of Bolton by Matt Cain. I only given this 5 stars, and this is one of my top 2 of the month. I loved this. I had so many thoughts. I have a whole reading vlog which you can check up there, because this is one of my most anticipated reads of the year. The narrative is that we're following the main character, Charlie. Oh my god, I forgot his name. And on his 9th birthday, his auntie Jan, who is a 90s icon, by the way, gives him the single for Lucky Star by Madonna, and this is a pivotal moment in his life because it cements like a love for Madonna, and she like follows him sort of throughout his life, and all of the chapters are of different like Madonna songs, which I just found so great. So it basically chronicles his life from like age 9 up to his like mid 30s ish. And I said how this isn't like, it's a large-ish chunk of someone's life. It's not the longest, obviously, but I feel like that time of your life is the time where you go through the biggest change, and as like a person, and like so much growth. And yeah, so it basically follows him sort of like growing up, and he is gay, and he deals with a lot of bullying, which is very difficult to read, and it sort of brought back some memories, but and then other things in his life, going through like university and like working and things with his family and stuff. And yeah, I think what this book does best is that it perfectly sums up this notion of it gets better, and it perfectly explores the idea of like queer shame and living as a queer person. And there is so much I resonated with, even though me and Charlie have such different lives we led leading, but I just had such a strong emotional impact by it. In that video I literally cried for like a solid like 10 minutes, but that was what I showed you. I literally probably cried for maybe an hour over this book, and it's not that it's the most heartbreakingly sad thing, it's just it's the type of book that makes me question what I love about reading. And it's not because it's the most lyrical, beautiful writing, it's not the most interesting like action-packed plot or anything. The characters are real, but they're not like really interesting people, but it's that I found so much relatability and I could see myself in it. And that is the reason I read, and that is the reason I love reading. So yeah, I absolutely adored this book, and I so recommend this. Like, please read this book to understand what it's like to grow up and live as a queer person. Obviously he grew up in the 80s and 90s, and things are a lot different now, but there is still a lot of similarity, and a lot of things people can learn from this, and yeah, I love it so much. And also just read it for the 80s references, just so iconic, so great. I loved it. Then I read a short story collection, which is Happy Stories Mostly by Norman Erickson Pasaribu, translated from Indonesian by Tiffany Sao. I did really enjoy this. I ended up giving it 4 stars. Overall, I think it's a very decent collection of stories, and yeah, I recommend it. Basically, it's called Happy Stories Mostly, but that is a very much a lie, because these are not happy for the most part. Some of them are like sort of a little bit in a way, but no. But yeah, it gives us 12 short stories, and I'm just quickly going to read out what they're sort of about. So they vary, but there's a running thread present too. He includes many themes throughout, including queerness, dominant one, grief, belonging, colonialism, religion, missed opportunities, alternative paths one might have took, environmentalism, and a general idea of living in contemporary and future Indonesia. And I said, yeah, so from the blurb, I'm just gonna read off here though. These tales put queer characters in situations and plots conventionally filled by hetero characters, and I say it is very accurate where some of the stories have a foundation in a character's queerness, but many are just general stories about other topics mentioned, but the characters just so happen to be queer, which I just really loved. And yeah, I really liked him. He's a poet as well, but I haven't read any of his poetry yet, but I really want to now. And I'm definitely intrigued. And I also found the chat between the author and the translator very interesting at the end, and it gives quite a good idea of how to understand some of the stories. And he details about how you should like maybe take your time with them. But yeah, so overall it's got a 4-star rating. Individually the different stories, I'm just going to read out what I gave each one. So the first one was Enkudu Comes Knocking on New Year's Eve, which I gave 2.5. A Bedtime Story for Your Long Sleep, I gave 4. What's Your Name, Sandra, 4.25. A Young Poet's Guide to Surviving a Broken Heart, 4. The True Story of the Giant, 4.75. Free Love You, 4 Despise You, 3. Mex Taku Jakarta 2038, 3.5. Deep Down Virgin on Black, 3.5. Welcome to the Department of Unanswered Prayers, 3.5. Ad Maiorium Diglororum, it's Latin, 3.75. Our descendants will be as numerous as the clouds in the sky, 4.75. And Her Story, 3.75. This averaged out to actually 3.77, but the inclusion of the chat between author and translator and the opening notes on the term hampir, I chose to round it up, and this is what I really loved. So I'm just going to quickly read out this opening section. Word, no, I don't know. Hampir, the Indonesian word for almost, only a letter away from vampire, the blood-sucking demon. What does it mean to be happy? Also, what does it mean to be almost happy? To almost get in, to be almost accepted, to be almost there, but at the same time, to not be there, accepted in. So, in a world where we celebrate Disney-ified heterosexualities, for queer folks, what is happiness? Often it becomes the blood-sucking demon, the vampire, the hampir. So yeah, I really love that. And yeah, so recommend this little short story collection.
This is a way to tell it has been so long. Oh my god, I'm the worst. I just go off and off and on.
But next I read Small Town Pride by Phil Stamper. This is my first, I believe, queer middle grade book, and I'm giving this 4.5 stars. I think I am going to do a separate video on reading like queer children's and middle grade books, so I'm not going to talk too much about this, but it basically follows the plot of 8th grader Jake, who recently comes out to his like parents, and it goes quite well, and his dad, to show support, flies a big massive pride flag in the front lawn, and most of the town seem to think it's okay, but then the rather manipulative mayor starts getting like emails about like, what does it show to the outsiders, blah 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 blah, like stuff like that, like what it shows that we're inclusive love. But anyway, and she is up for election, so she's like very like, I need to dull it down. But anyway, some things happen, and there's sort of like this idea of how the fact that this small town of Barton Springs could have a pride festival or pride parade seems like so absurd, but Jake is like, why is it absurd? Like, I don't really get that. So with the help of his long-term best friend Jenna and a new friend Brett, who is the mayor's son, by the way, they start to plot and try and make it a reality. So yeah, I just really love this. There is so much great inclusion and just a lot. I just really enjoyed this book. It's really sweet, and I just think what I love most about it is the fact that it is a thing that children can see on the shelf, because I didn't have anything like this when I was growing up, just so it can be in libraries and schools and in the hands of children, so they know that they are normal and they're not alone. And it's also just an interesting, fun story. So yeah, I really recommend this. Obviously it is aimed at children, so that's what the language is like, but I'm an adult and I enjoyed it, so take that as you will. I think we're about halfway now. June was a long month of reading, but I read A Radical Love by Neil Blackmore. I love the way this shines. I am giving this 5 stars. I also have a video planned that I might do where I read queer historical novels, because I've got some other new ones that recently came out that I really want to get to. So I think I might leave off talking too much about this until then, but basically it follows a story of John Church. This is the name he's sort of like given because he's like abandoned by a church, and he is like a, what's the word, like a pastor, priest, vicar, something. He works in the church as well, but it sort of like tells the story of the Clare Market, or a Clare Market, Molly House, which was sort of like a 1800s, like early 1800s, like gay bar, and he was a real person, and it tells a story of sort of like an alternative sort of like life, or about like history of what happened there, about how he used to like perform marriages for certain men, and there's just a lot happens, and there's also sort of like a romance as well that blooms with another character. And there's like a lot of talk about like colonialism and like racism and like slavery, because it's not that long after Britain abolished slavery, and yeah, also about like queerness and gender identity and sexualities, and like between sexes as well. It's a very, very sad book as well, and I did cry at this. It's a lot of things are very hard to read, and it gets quite a little bit graphic as well at times. Also, there is like some sexual like talk and things, but even though I don't usually like them, I did quite like them in this, because the things that the things the characters are saying and doing, they're only doing it because this is the only time that they can really show this side of themselves whilst they're in like a Molly House, because if they do anything outside, they're literally going to get beaten on the street and killed, or like put in prison, and you know, like it's a very bad time to be queer, like in public. So I did sort of like understand, and I got it. Also, I liked how the main character in a way like broke the fourth wall, in a sense, where he seems like he's talking to the reader of the future, and I just felt like there was just really like, it's like it's intimate, and it just shows, I don't really know what it shows, but I did really enjoy this. And like the main character is a little bit grey in a sense as well, which I don't usually like, but I did quite like it. I don't know, I have a lot of thoughts on this book, but if I do make that video, then check that out. But if not, I might just maybe do a whole review on it, because I do have a lot to say. So yeah, read that.
Coffee break. Because the next book is another banger.
This was The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin. He's a cute little nephew. But this is my first work by Baldwin, and it is certainly no way going to be the last. I really enjoyed this. I'm giving it 5 stars. It comprises of 2 essays / letters, where he perfectly explains the racial nightmare that was happening in America with such brutal honesty and rawness. It starts with a letter to his then 15-year-old nephew James as well, telling him his current place in American society as a young black man, and how he is like destined to like live in the gutter in a sense, and the white people in America aren't ready for him to be like an equal person, but he needs to first accept himself and believe in himself and aspire to more, to truly live like a life. And then the second one is like a longer piece, and I'm just gonna read my review because I think I better summed it up than I can at the moment, but I am gonna do probably a reread of this and do some like underlining stuff, because I do feel like there is probably still a lot more I can learn from, even though I did learn quite a bit. But yeah, let me show you it. So the longer piece it tells the reader of Baldwin's experiences of growing up in Harlem with racial discrimination, his interactions with religion, Christianity, and later the Nation of Islam movement, and how as a society we need to think about things differently to ever move forward. There's maybe some like convoluted or tangential passages, but I think it adds to the humanness of this book, and there is just so much honesty in it, and it's just like he's just talking to you, which I just absolutely loved, like just sharing his wisdom, and it's just amazing. At the heart, this book is a plea to end the legacy of racial injustice that plagued and still does America at the time of writing in 1963, and was influential in the growing civil rights movement. But additionally, Baldwin's grasp on the human condition is put forward with a pinpoint accuracy that you can't help but sit back and take a few moments to really like take in what he's saying. And although it may seem hard and a little preachy at time about how like love will overcome hate and things, I do think that it is still something we should aspire to, because hopefully this is what the thing that will like matter. And this book has many well-penned quotes and passages, and I said these are my favorites, so I just put a few, but I'm just only going to read out one that I really loved from this book. Life is tragic simply because the earth turns and the sun inexorably rises and sets, and one day for each of us the sun will go down for the last time. Perhaps the root of our trouble, the human trouble, is that we will sacrifice all the beauty of our lives, will imprison ourselves in totems, taboos, crosses, blood sacrifices, steeples, mosques, races, armies, flags, nations, in order to deny the fact of death, which is the only fact we have. It seems to me that one ought to rejoice in the face of death, or to decide, indeed, to earn one's death by confronting with passion the conundrum of life. One is responsible to life. It is the small beacon in that terrifying darkness from which we will come and to which we shall return. One must negotiate this passage as nobly as possible for the sake of those who are coming after us. Yeah, so that sort of gives insight into the type of writing and I guess what he's trying to say. But yeah, I really love this. And once again, if this book was read in another month, it probably would have been one of my favourite of the months. But Madonna and Another Book took that spot. So I'm sorry, Baldwin. But I think Giovanni's Room is probably going to be another favourite of this year when I finally get to it. So you have your chance then. But yeah, read this, definitely read this, please. It is so good. And then I read the only book this month that I didn't like. This is Last Word from Montmartre by Chu Miaojin. It is translated from Chinese. The author is from Taiwan, by Ari Larissa Heinrich. And I am giving this 2.5 stars. This is another one that I like annotated in a sense, because I thought I was gonna love this book, but I didn't. It's quite hard to review this book, and I think I'm gonna leave off saying anything about it until I really finalize my thoughts and do a whole like video review on this. And I know I've said that like in the past couple of wrap-ups that I'm going to do a whole video on a certain book, but I am going to try and get around to doing them soon and get them out. So yeah, it basically follows these sort of like these non-linear letters in a way which you can actually read in any order the author says, about sort of like an ending love affair between her and another woman, and sort of like the ideas of like living in like another country in a sense, and yeah, and sort of like other elements of like coming of age, politics, gender discussions, love and other emotions, platonic and romantic relationships, and a dive into this concept of human nature or the human condition. And also another topic is the narrator's deteriorating mental health as the book progresses with her thoughts of suicide. And like, it's not a spoiler because it does say on the back of, I believe, the only English edition possible, which is by New York Review Books, and it does actually say that as well in this front. But the author did die by suicide, I believe, shortly after writing this book, and it was like finalized and published posthumously. And in some essence, some people see this as her suicide note, and I don't. It's a hard one to think about and review. So yeah, so I'm gonna hold off saying too much about it until I really finalize my thoughts. So wait for that video to come. If I go back and edit this, I'm gonna put the link up there. So yeah. Also, I've got this cut, but I don't know how I got it at all. But anywho, and then another book that I'm gonna not talk too much about because it's gonna be in my queer middle grade books. This is Both Can Be True by Jules Matthias. This is a dual POV book. The first character is Ash, and I'm gonna call them they because later on in the book that is what they decide they want to be called at that moment in time, but they don't identify or label themselves. I'm just gonna say that they are queer, and they are sort of gender fluid in a sense, but then again, I don't want to give them a label because they don't explicitly label themselves in it, and they are quite anti-label character as well. But them and Daniel, yeah, and he's sort of like overly emotional a bit, and he sort of like gets in this conundrum of like he needs to take care of this like leaky Pomeranian called Chewbacca, and he sort of ropes in Ash as well to help, and it's sort of like a little bit like a romance brewing as well. But this one I'm not going to say too much about because I'm going to talk about it in that other video. But that is sort of like the story and how like they need to like get away from the things. I really love the representation because it's like a middle grade book, and it has like a lot of like, there's also like other queer characters and like other people with different like ethnicities, and there was a lot like in it, like representation wise. I mean, it's so great that like children have this, and also like Chewbacca was just so adorable. But yeah, what I didn't exactly like, and why I lowered it down a bit, is that I feel like the discourse on the idea of labels was quite anti them, even though some people in the queer community do really like the idea of having a label and something that they can identify with, and I feel like it's sort of like shut down and maybe it lacks a bit of nuance, but overall I did enjoy this, and I would so recommend it still. Now we come on to the best of the year. Is Tin Man by Sarah Winman. I haven't fully done my review of this. I think I'm probably gonna go back maybe and add to it and stuff, but I am 100% giving this a reread. I'm gonna say that this is in the running as my favorite book of the year, but I don't know yet, and I haven't done my mid-year freakout tag when I will confirm or not whether it is, but this is definitely the best of the month. I loved this so much. It is so short. I literally cannot recommend this enough. I'm just going to read my review that I've already written, but I'm probably going to do a whole review video on this. I have a little short, but it has like no views and like no likes, which is like a little bit sad. But anyway, a little quote to start. It was simple, it was daft, it was beautiful, it was Michael. I won't describe the plots, as I truly believe you should go into this book blind. The back cover only says it's about Ellis and Michael, and then a gal called Annie arrives. The reading experience, getting to understand the story, events fitting into place, and character interactions are so worthwhile. It was of the utmost pleasure to read this book. I say that, but oh my, did women give me all the feels, and I can confirm I cried multiple times at this little book. Beautifully raw and heartbreaking writing adds to this, but there's also many lovely parts too. It's quite a roller coaster. I know I have to give this book a reread, and it'll be a horrible knowing what's to come as I do so, to cement my thoughts, because in many ways I'm at a loss for words after finishing it. I do know it instantly became a new favourite of mine, and I'm extremely grateful to have read this book. Please read it, you will not regret it. So yeah, so that's all I really have to say, because you need to go in this book not knowing too much about it to get the best and most out of it. And I just loved it. I loved it so much. It's such an emotional book, and like the bits set in France just sort of gave me Lie With Me vibes, and the whole book gives me Lie With Me vibes, and I love Lie With Me. Also, it sort of reminds me a little bit of like My Policeman, but just done like so much better than My Policeman. And I was also say My Policeman is bad because I have a weird relationship with My Policeman. That's by Beth and Roberts, by the way. But this is, I would read this like over that like any day of the week. But yeah, read this book, please. It's so good. The penultimate book, so we're getting there, even though I'm at over an hour and 10 minutes of filming, but I finally got round to and finished Red, White and Royal Blue. Why did I say that weird? I don't know. By Casey McQuiston. I ended up giving this 4 stars. If you can't gather by the genre, which is a romance, and the cover, which I don't know if this is a hot take, but I think this cover is so disgusting. I hate the way the characters look. I don't know what it is about this, but I just really hate it. I do kind of like that it does sort of match my hair in a sense, but I think this is hideous. Is that a hot take? Am I going to be hated on for that? I don't know, but I do not like this cover. Anywho, it's got nothing to do with the actual book. Yeah, so it's a gay romance between Alex, the first son of the female, which I didn't know going into this, but I don't know why I assumed it's a man, because I shouldn't, but anyway, the female president of the United States, and Henry, the Prince of Wales, the Queen's grandson. Their relationship starts as rivals to friends to lovers, and I won't say any more about the plot because that'll just be spoilers. So yeah, I liked it. It's very bingeable and readable. The plot is engrossing and the characters are all quite developed. The world that McQuiston creates is quite like a liberal one, which I did quite like in a way. It's something that it would be nice to aspire to. But I do have a little bit of a problem because like a lot of the things that I like is so like unlikely that would happen, especially like the thing about like people in the royal family being like anti-colonial. I was like, no, I don't think so. And also a lot of this book, it panders on the idea that what they're doing can have grave like international consequences, and I feel like when things come out, in a sense, I don't know if it's a spoiler, I hope it's not a spoiler, but the repercussions aren't really like at a right level to what they would be. And I get it's fiction and is obviously not real, any of it, but it's based in reality. And I don't know, I sort of feel like maybe it did a little bit of a disservice to like the ordinary queer person, where like obviously these two characters have immense like wealth and power and obviously like privilege as well. And yeah, also that's another thing that like I feel like I wouldn't read this over like a romance or any type of genre book about just like ordinary people. I feel like when I read, I like to really be able to relate to the characters, and there is some essence within the two of them that I did like and relate to, but I would always choose like ordinary lay people over like the first son and a prince. But yeah, also like I found some like the sex scene parts I just don't like reading them, and I thought that like it was going to be quite a lot of that, but as the book progressed they did dial down and became less of a feature, which I did actually kind of like. I found my favorite bits was probably the email exchanges, where they're just talking about like their life and like their history in the past and just like getting to know each other. I just felt it was just really fun and interesting just to talk about and learn. And it's that what I love the most. I kind of wish there was more of. It's also a little bit chunky, and I feel like some bits could have been omitted, because yeah, I don't know, I just feel like I kind of wanted more of the emails and less of maybe some other stuff, and you sort of like have to go through quite a lot to actually get like what the plot of the story is like pining on, and to like get to like major plot points. So yeah, and I think the writing, it's nothing amazing, but it's bingeable and it's good. It's not like quotable or anything really in my opinion, but it's still decent. Yeah, I am giving this 4 stars. I think I already said that. And although I'm focusing on negatives in my review, I did enjoy it. I liked it. Like 4 stars is a good rating still. And I am so happy that it has so much like love, and it's so like big on like Book Talk and BookTube, Bookstagram, and it's like it's a queer story, and so many people love it, which is great. Like if I was like younger and this was like the it book to read, I'd be like, oh, that's so great, like what's it about, I'd be intrigued and stuff. And the fact that it's queer just makes it so much better. But I do think there is other like queer romances or other queer books that I think deserve the hype more. But that being said, I did still enjoy this, and I'm so happy that it has the platform it does. And yeah, I can't wait to read One Last Stop by McQuiston, and I do still recommend this book. So yeah. And finally, last but not least, we have Canto and Othered Poems by Joel Taylor, and I'm giving this 4.25 stars. Started with poetry, ended with poetry. I really enjoyed this book.
Oh my god, I saw my review and I saw that I wrote so much about this book, but I'm kind of, I kind of want to get this video over because it's, oh, let me get my coffee. Because I'm thirsty and I have a lot to say again, but anyway.
I like how this book starts with the opening in the preface. This book is the book of silences, which I think perfectly sets the tone. And yeah, I found the preface and glossary quite helpful in understanding both the order of the poems, and she gives an insight into each sections. And yeah, so I highly recommend reading this book. It's split into 3 distinct sections. The like titular namesake one, Canto, or C plus NTO, is the second part, and this is sandwiched in between Vitrine and Vitrine Reprise, which is a continuation of the first part. And then the last is titled Oh Maryville. So yeah, so in Vitrine, she tells the stories of scenes within these glass like display cases, which have been replaced by or placed next to certain queer sites. Like from the preface, she says each case holds a different scene: first loves, bar fights, arrest, explosions, serpentine pride marches, an old drag queen, a woman circling a boxing ring, and an old Maryville, a fictitious dive bar. And then following, it stated that this will be a walk through the maze of Vitrine's one constant narrative told in separate parts. And on the whole, I did like these sections where the recurring notional absence and loss is explored. This is expanded on in the second part, Canto, which acts as part memoir at times, which, this is a quote, focuses on the loss of my friends and of my exile as a consequence of my sexuality, talking about the author growing up queer in the 1980s with a quote that stuck with me: first they take your mouth, then the whole of your body. I wear the abuse as a suit. In this part, there are 7 poems taking us through Taylor's life in essence, each titled The Body as Battleground, Protest, Trespass, Cemetery, Backroom, Haunted House, and Uprising. And all of these, I didn't necessarily enjoy given their content, but I understood. I took my time reading parts to truly grapple with the meaning. And one of my favourite parts of the book comes at the end of the last poem. Which goes, I can't remember the names of all my dead friends, but they are here now. Our grief, a leather jacket, a laughter, static as we fade to a sepia, the colour of blood mixed to water, disappearing down a plug hole, much like the meeting of our legs. And yeah, and then also from the preface, something else that is very much part of this section is how the idea of butch lesbians have always been and still are marginalised within the queer community. And how, this is from a quote, the book is set in what is now thought of as the golden age of the gay. We have regressed as a community. Our meeting places, clubs and bars have closed. We inhabit separate rooms in the same club. Adding, if we were to regain the real life meeting grounds, if we were to be in the same room, then perhaps we would remember our commonality. Speaking to both the loss of certain queer spaces where lesbians felt community and safety, and the growing infighting within the queer movement. And then finally, the third part is the story of one night at Maryville, which is this like fictitious bar within the mid to late 90s. There are 4 like characters who turn up based on people Taylor knew in some sense, called Dudsell, Angel, Valentine, and Jack Catch, and they are there to make sure the patrons and the bar are kept safe, examining their lives and that of butch lesbians at the time. This section is based on the author's own experiences at such bars, but she's also done research which together, quote, constructed a simple story: exile, friendship, grief, love, courage, and threat. And whilst I cannot know what it's like to be someone in this situation, Taylor paints a vivid picture of such a narrative, and it does flow. There are 32 poems split into 12 sections which make use of stage directions. All the poems vary in form and understanding, but I did enjoy the majority of them. I underlined at least something in each, some more than others, but I think my favourites were Legend of the First Butch, which I was really taken aback by, and then the 3 towards the end, which created an emotional response in me. These were Black Triangle, about the badges lesbians were forced to wear in Nazi Germany, Eulogy, where the main character of the poem, Taylor herself I believe, is carrying queer women from places where they're under attack or already been killed, and this is mentioned in the preface about how nearly a quarter of the world is still illegal to be a lesbian. But my ultimate favourite poem is that in between these last 2, entitled December, which starts with the final social media post by a Chechnya LGBT group in 2017, and what follows is an emotional first-person account of a queer woman being caught up in a raid or arrest, and it brings us round to other cases of discrimination. And overall I think that was really, really good. So over as a whole, I did really quite enjoy reading this despite the content, and I do have a lot of praise and would really, really recommend it. I haven't really read that much lesbian literature, but unfortunately, and it's something I do know I need to read more of, to know more about different parts of the community. But I am so happy I read this, and I do really, really recommend this. This was a very, very long video, but I hope you stayed with me for it. Practically all of these books I recommend, apart from Last Word from Montmartre, but I would still possibly recommend giving it a thoughts of reading. Notes on a Crocodile by her, which is her first novel. I am definitely much more excited to read, but yeah, these are quite a heavy stack. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed my wrap up. It was a long one. Thank you for staying. But yeah, so get yourself an iced coffee, which the ice is now melted. Read some queer books and have a gay old time. I shall see you very soon.